I woke up that morning the same way I had for the past 3 years, quietly, slowly, and with the kind of stiffness that doesn't announce itself so much as settle in your bones like cold rain. The house was still dim, that sleepy blue color that comes right before the sun climbs the windows. I sat up on the edge of the bed, waited for my joints to remember they were joints, then slid my feet into my slippers. For a moment, I just breathed, small, steady breaths. The house may not have belonged to me, but the silence in it did. Silence is the last territory an old man can claim without anyone arguing. I shuffled toward the kitchen, trying not to wake anyone. My son, Marcus, always complained that I made too much noise in the mornings, even though the floor creaked the same way it had since before he was born. The house wasn't built to hold secrets. Still, I tried. When I reached the kitchen, I flicked on the little lamp by the counter, the one with the yellow shade that looked like it came straight out of a yard sale. I used to tease my wife about things like that. She called it vintage charm. I called it something that'll burn out soon. Now, it was all I had left of her in this house. I made myself oatmeal, the bland kind, no sugar. My doctor insisted on it. My children thought it was odd I always followed instructions, but they never understood that when you get old, rules are the few things that keep you steady. The body has its limits, and mine asks for little, but it demands routine. As the oatmeal simmered, I reached for the small plastic organizer on the shelf, the one with the days of the week neatly printed across the top, my medication. 5 pills every morning before breakfast. They never used to bother me, just part of the ritual. But today, the case wasn't there. I blinked, thinking maybe I hadn't looked properly. I checked the shelf again, then the counter, then the drawer beside the stove, the one I never used. No medication. A small knot of concern pulled tight under my ribs. I checked again, more frantic this time, though I tried to keep my breathing steady. My heart doesn't like surprises. My doctor said the medication was not optional. I could already hear the warning in his voice. I stood there staring at the empty shelf, feeling something colder than the morning settle beneath my skin. Footsteps appeared behind me, light ones. That meant it was my daughter-in-law. "Good morning, Dad," she said, though she said dad the way someone might say stray cat. Her robe was tied neatly, her hair pinned up without a single rebel strand. She didn't look tired enough for someone who had a 6-year-old. I forced a smile. "Morning. Have you seen my pills?" She poured her coffee slowly, carefully, as if considering whether I deserved an answer. "Oh, I think you must have misplaced them," she said lightly. "You're always moving things around." I stared at her. I don't move things around. I barely touch anything in this house. I feel like a ghost half the time, present enough to haunt, but not enough to be truly seen. "I keep them right here," I said softly, pointing to the empty shelf. She took a sip of her coffee without looking at me. "Well, check your room. Maybe you put them somewhere else." My room? Yes, that must be it. That must be where my memory failed, because old people misplace things. Old people forget. Old people are the problem. I didn't argue. Not yet. I walked back down the hallway, past the family photos that stopped including me somewhere around 2018. I opened my bedroom door and searched every place I could think of. Under the bed, beside the lamp, in the drawer with my socks. No pills. My chest tightened a little more now. Not a dangerous tightness yet, but the kind that warns you, this isn't right. I sat on the bed, exhaled carefully, and pressed my hands against my knees to keep them from trembling. At my age, everything feels like it could be the beginning of something bad. That was when my son, Marcus, appeared in the doorway. He didn't knock. He never knocked. "Dad," he said, arms folded across his chest, "could you try not to wake the whole house when you get up?" "I didn't make any noise," I said quietly. He shrugged like it didn't matter. "Just saying." We stared at each other for a long moment. He's taller than me now, broader too, though he never worked a physically demanding job. He always had the strength of someone who thought he deserved it. "Your mother used to wake up singing," I said gently. "You complained then too." "Yeah, well, that was different." "No, it wasn't. But arguing with him is like throwing stones at a river. You don't stop its direction, and you only exhaust your arm." I cleared my throat. My medication is missing. He looked me up and down with a frown. Dad, I'm sure you just lost it. You lose things all the time. I don't. But there it was again, the assumption, the one they wrap around me like a blanket I never asked for. I need those pills, I said. I need them every morning. He sighed, impatient. Check later. We're leaving soon and I don't have time for another issue. Another issue. That's what he called last night's argument. That fight flickered in my mind again. My voice raised for the first time in months, telling them they shouldn't leave their child home alone, even for 10 minutes. My daughter-in-law shouting that I always see the worst in everything. My son slamming the door because Dad needs to remember he doesn't run this house. Maybe it was just a coincidence my medication vanished the next morning, but I've lived too long to believe in coincidences that arrive with perfect timing. I'll look again, I murmured. Good idea, he said, already walking away. When he was gone, the house felt quiet again, but not my kind of quiet. This one felt heavy, watching, waiting. And in that quiet, something crawled coldly through my chest. I wasn't imagining it. They hid my medication, not misplaced, not forgotten. Hid. The oatmeal on the stove was burning now, giving off a bitter smell. I didn't turn it off. For the first time in years, I felt something dark and old rustling inside me, something I hadn't felt since my kids were small, and consequences were still something they understood. I whispered to myself, barely audible, "What have you done?" And the house did not answer. The mind has a cruel way of replaying things you wish it wouldn't. As I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the spot where my medication should have been, last night's argument began to seep back into my thoughts like smoke under a door. Thick, creeping, impossible to ignore. It had started so small. These things often do. My son and daughter-in-law had been getting ready to run out to the grocery store. Nothing urgent, just a quick trip. The kind of errand people take their time with, wandering aisles, checking sales, pretending life is more interesting than it is. I was in the living room, the old love seat that sank in the middle the way my wife used to say couches did when they got tired. I heard my grandson, little Noah, calling out from his room, "Mom? Dad? Are you leaving?" My daughter-in-law, Claire, didn't answer. She was digging around in her purse, muttering about coupons or keys or something insignificant. My son, Marcus, just shouted over his shoulder, "We'll be back in 10 minutes." The boy's voice softened with worry. "Can I come?" "No," they both said at the same time. And that was it. No explanation, no reassurance, just the door swinging shut. I remember standing up, my knees protesting, and calling after them, "You're leaving him alone?" Claire rolled her eyes as if the roof had insulted her. "He's 6, not 6 months, Dad." My stomach clenched. 6 is still too young. Anything can happen. What if he falls, or someone comes to the door, or he— "Dad," Marcus snapped, yanking open the hall closet, "can we not do this right now?" "No," I said, louder than I intended. "You shouldn't leave him alone, 10 minutes or not." The air froze. I could feel it in my bones. Claire turned toward me slowly, like someone facing an inconvenience instead of a person. "You know what the real problem is?" she said. "You think you get to make the rules just because you're older." I blinked at her. "No," I murmured. "I'm speaking as a father and a grandfather." She scoffed. "Exactly. You think your title gives you authority over our household." Marcus joined in, running hot with that temper he inherited from his mother's side. "You always do this, Dad, always criticizing, always acting like we're irresponsible. We're adults. We know what we're doing." "Then act like it," I said quietly, and that was when he snapped. He got in my face, close enough for me to see the faint stubble he hadn't shaved that morning, close enough for me to smell the mint on his breath, close enough for me to remember, in a flash, what he looked like at 12 years old when he used to cling to my sleeve in crowded stores. "You don't run this house," he said, jabbing a finger in my direction. "You may have gotten away with that when I was a kid, but not now." I looked at him for a long moment. "I never tried to run your life," I whispered. "I just tried to protect it." He laughed, a cold, humorless little sound. "Yeah? Well, maybe you should start protecting yourself because your attitude is getting old. My heart cracked a little, not in a dramatic way, quietly, like a glass cooling too fast after coming out of the oven. "Marcus," I said softly, "I'm just asking you to be careful with your child." Claire rolled her eyes again so hard I thought they might get stuck. "Oh, please, we were gone 5 minutes. Stop acting like you're some kind of hero. You're just extra weight right now. Drama we don't need." Extra weight? Drama? I'd heard words like that before, but never from the mouths I'd fed, clothed, and stayed awake for through fevers and nightmares and scraped knees. And I wish I could say I'd responded with grace, with calm wisdom, with the patience everyone assumes old men have by default. But I didn't. Something inside me gave way. "You two are so careless," I told them, "and one day your carelessness is going to cost something you can't replace." They both stared at me as if I'd slapped them. Claire's jaw tightened. "Wow, so now he's threatening us?" Marcus shook his head. "Unbelievable." Then came the final strike. "Dad," he said, hand on the doorknob, "you're a guest here. Start acting like one." A guest? In the house I once helped him paint? In the home where I cooked dinners 2 nights a week? In the place they begged me to move into after his mother died, because we want you close. But closeness fades fast when convenience is more important than compassion. They left without another word. The slam of the door echoed long after they were gone. That was last night, and now, in the dim hush of morning, my medication, the one thing that kept my heart steady, was gone. Not lost, not misplaced. Hidden. Punishment disguised as forgetfulness. A lesson, maybe, or a warning. Either way, the realization crawled into my blood like frost. My chest tightened, not from the missing pills, but from the betrayal that came with them. My son, the boy who used to sob when I left for work, now looked at me like I was a burden. My daughter-in-law, the girl who once hugged me during her engagement party, now spoke to me as if I were a tenant who had overstayed his lease. I sat with these memories swirling like dust in sunlight, each one scraping against the next. Then I felt a faint vibration, my phone buzzing in my pocket. A message from Noah. "Grandpa, are you okay? I heard Mom and Dad yelling yesterday. I didn't want them to leave me alone." My throat tightened. Not everything in this house was broken. Not yet. I typed back slowly, my fingers trembling, not from fear, but from something older, heavier. "I'm all right, sweetheart." It wasn't a lie. It wasn't the truth either. Because as I set the phone down, the dizziness began. Subtle at first, like the room was turning 1 degree to the left. I closed my eyes. No medication, no support, and no more illusions. Whatever last night had awakened, it wasn't finished with me. Not by a long shot. By noon, the dizziness had become a familiar companion, one I didn't ask for, didn't invite, and couldn't get rid of. It clung to me every time I stood, a soft tilt of the world that warned, "You don't have long before this gets dangerous." I had lived long enough to know my body wasn't making empty threats. Still, I moved around the house quietly, the way old men do when they're trying not to disturb whatever predators linger in the dark. My son and daughter-in-law went about their day as if nothing had happened. Claire on her laptop at the kitchen counter, Marcus clomping around the house searching for tools he never actually used. But I felt them watching me in invisible ways. You can always tell when people are waiting for you to fail. I returned to the kitchen, not because I needed anything, but because habits are comforting when nothing else is. I opened drawers, cabinet doors, shelves, slowly at first, then faster. My breath got shorter with each empty search. Nothing. The medication did not magically reappear. And my children did not offer the slightest hint of concern. They didn't ask, "Dad, are you feeling okay?" They didn't say, "Let's look together." They didn't even pretend. Instead, Claire looked up from her laptop with the faintest smirk, one she tried to hide behind a sip of her iced coffee. "You're still hunting for those pills?" she asked, voice light, casual, as if she were asking about a missing sock. I turned to face her slowly. "Yes." She shrugged. "Maybe your memory's slipping more than you realize." Her tone had the softness of a feather and the sting of a blade. Insults coming from someone who has perfected passive cruelty always sound like kindness if you don't listen closely. "I haven't misplaced anything," I said quietly. Marcus entered then, wiping his hands on a rag like he'd just finished honest labor. "Dad, you stress too much. Just relax today. Don't go tearing the place apart." "I'm not tearing anything," I murmured, though my heartbeat was beginning to climb. "I just want my medication." He laughed, the wrong kind of laugh, the kind that doesn't belong on a son's face when talking to his father. "Maybe skipping a dose will calm you down. You've been tense lately." My palms grew cold. This wasn't forgetfulness. This wasn't negligence. This was intentional. The thought burned through my mind like lightning through a dry tree trunk. And once the idea solidified, I couldn't shake it. They hid my medication to punish me, to make a point, to regain control. I swallowed back the tightness in my throat. "That medication is important, Marcus. You know that." "What I know," he said, leaning against the counter, "is that you've been on edge. A day without pills won't kill you. Maybe it'll remind you to stay in your lane." My lane. A lane I apparently crossed last night when I dared to protect my grandson. "You're not the authority here anymore," Claire added, tapping her nails on her coffee mug. "You can't tell us how to parent or how to run our home." I stood there, gripping the counter, the edges digging into my palms. I wasn't angry the way younger men get angry, quick, loud, explosive. My anger was older, heavier, the kind that gathers slowly in the chest like storm clouds that know they'll flood the whole valley before they're done. "You think taking away my medication is teaching me something?" I asked softly. Marcus's eyes flicked away for a second, a short second, but enough. He knew. He knew exactly what he was doing. "We didn't take anything," he said too quickly. And that lie, that ugly, flimsy, fragile little lie, was what sealed the truth for me. Suddenly, I felt the dizziness return, sharper, like a quick pull downward from inside my skull. I put a hand on the back of a chair to steady myself. My vision blurred for a moment, the edges softening like a poorly focused camera. Claire noticed. For a heartbeat, I thought she might soften. Instead, she tightened her robe and said, "You see? That's what happens when you get worked up. Sit down and you'll feel fine." I didn't sit down. I walked out. Not because I had anywhere particular to go, but because staying in that kitchen a second longer felt like inviting a wolf to judge my weakness. I made my way to the living room, sat down on the sunken couch. The house hummed with an eerie calm, one that felt like the quiet inside a storm's eye. My hands trembled slightly. My breathing became shallow. No medication meant my condition would worsen, and the people who should have cared did not. The people who should have checked on me did not. The people who should have said, "Let me help you," instead chose to punish me with silence. My mind drifted back, years back, to a moment I thought I'd forgotten. Marcus, 7 years old, caught lying about breaking a window. His face red, tears clinging to his eyelashes as he whispered, "Please don't tell Dr. Alvarez." I smiled at the memory, not because it was funny, but because of what it meant. Dr. Alvarez, our family doctor for decades, had been the one person my children feared growing up, not out of cruelty, but because he had a way of seeing right through them. He had a booming voice, stern eyes, and an unshakable expectation that children treat their elders with respect. They might have ignored me now, but back then, just hearing his name straightened their spines. I hadn't thought about the doctor in years, but the memory flickered, then grew, then sharpened, and suddenly, as if a hand reached into my chest and squeezed gently, a new thought formed. If they won't help me, someone else will. My breathing steadied just enough to let clarity in. Not strength, clarity. I pushed myself up from the couch. My knees cracked, my heart thudded harder than it should have. The room wavered slightly, but I forced my focus toward my bedroom. Inside, in the bottom drawer of my nightstand, lay a small old flip phone. The one they told me to get rid of because he never calls anyone. A phone they assumed I couldn't use, didn't need, wouldn't touch. They underestimated me. They always underestimate me. I opened the drawer, pulled out the phone, sat on the edge of my bed. The world tilted slightly again, but I held myself steady. I flipped the phone open. The glow of the small screen felt like hope. I scrolled through the old contacts. Most of the names belonged to ghosts now. Old neighbors, old friends, my wife's cousins, people whose funerals I had attended. But one name still shined with sharp clarity: Dr. Alvarez. The one person who scared my children more than punishment, more than consequences, more than anything. I hesitated for only a moment. Then I pressed call. The phone rang, and with each ring my breath steadied. Someone would answer. Someone always had. And whoever answered would learn exactly what my children had done. The phone rang 3 times before I heard the familiar click, followed by a voice I hadn't heard in far too long. Deep, steady, and unmistakably firm. "Hello, this is Dr. Alvarez." For a second, my throat closed. Not because I was nervous. No, that wasn't it. It was something heavier, something that had been gathering inside my chest ever since my children started treating me like an inconvenience. "Doctor," I said, my voice thinner than I wanted it to be. "It's me, Harold." There was a beat of silence. Then the tone shifted sharply, the way metal shifts under pressure. "Harold, you sound winded. What's going on?" I closed my eyes. The dizziness had sharpened, threading through my skull like a dull blade. Sweat pricked the back of my neck, even though the room was cold. I can't find my medication," I murmured. "My morning pills. They're gone." He inhaled audibly. "Gone? What do you mean gone?" I swallowed. "I looked everywhere. I didn't misplace them." "Harold," he said slowly, voice changing into that controlled, authoritative tone I remembered so well. "Did someone remove them from your reach?" The question landed like a hammer. I didn't answer right away, because saying the truth out loud makes it real in a way silent suffering never does. But the reality was already sitting across from me in this room, staring at me like a ghost with no name. I breathed out, shaky. "Yes, I believe they were hidden from me." A pause, sharp, long, cold. "By whom?" he asked carefully. "My son," I whispered, "and my daughter-in-law." Another moment of silence stretched through the line. Then, "Sit down. Don't move. Don't try to walk anywhere," he ordered. "I'm coming right now." "No, doctor, you don't have to." "Harold," his voice boomed through the tiny speaker with the same authority that used to freeze my children in their tracks. "This is elder neglect. I'm not asking permission. Stay seated." He hung up before I could protest. I stared at the phone, feeling both relief and dread pull at me like opposing tides. The dizziness swelled again, thicker this time, and I clutched the edge of my bed. Down the hallway I heard steps. Light, hurried, paired with the faint clinking of dishes. My daughter-in-law's voice followed, annoyingly cheerful as she spoke into her phone about brunch plans. Her world was so small, so shallow, yet she thought she towered above me. I pushed myself to stand, moving toward the doorframe for support. Each step felt like I was walking on the deck of a ship in a storm. The house tilted, straightened, tilted again. I made my way to the living room, lowering myself slowly onto the couch. My vision pulsed in and out of clarity. My hands trembled. I hated this. Not the weakness. Old age comes with its own kind of surrender. But the fact that the people who should have cared for me had become the storm instead of shelter. A familiar voice cut through the quiet. "Dad?" Marcus appeared near the hallway, his expression pulling tight into that impatient scowl he wore far too often. "You okay?" he asked, but it was the kind of question one asks when hoping for the answer yes so they can move on with their day. "I called someone," I said softly. He frowned. "Who?" "Dr. Alvarez." The reaction was immediate. His face drained of color in a way I hadn't seen since he was a boy caught cheating on a spelling test. His shoulders tensed, his jaw clenched. Even his steps faltered, like the name alone unsteadied him. "Why would you call him?" he demanded. "He's my doctor," I replied simply. "He needed to know I'm without medication." "I told you it's fine," Marcus snapped. "You're overreacting. We'll get it later." "You hid it," I said. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. "We didn't hide anything. Dad, seriously." But before he could lie again, Claire entered the room with the confidence of someone who thinks their version of reality is the only one that matters. "What is going on?" she asked, crossing her arms. "Dad called that old doctor," Marcus muttered through clenched teeth. Her expression flickered, something between shock and irritation. "Why?" I looked at her calmly. "Because I asked for my medication, and you refused to help me find it." "We didn't refuse," she snapped. "You just don't listen. You misplace things. We didn't do anything wrong." My head throbbed with a pulse that seemed to echo her words. "Where are my pills?" I asked again, more firmly this time. She opened her mouth to answer, but the sound of a car pulling into the driveway cut through the room like a blade. There was a loud, urgent knock. Marcus stiffened. Claire looked toward the front door as if expecting it to fall off its hinges. Then, bang, bang! "Open the door," a deep voice commanded. "Dr. Alvarez." I felt Marcus tense beside me, like a child bracing for punishment. Funny how some fears never age. Claire hurried forward. Just a second. But she barely cracked the door when the doctor brushed past her with a force that defied his years. He wasn't a tall man, nor particularly muscular, but authority radiated from him like heat from a furnace. His eyes, dark, fierce, immediately landed on me. "Harold," he said, "are you stable? Chest pain? Trouble breathing? Can you sit upright?" I nodded, though my breath was thin. Just dizzy. He knelt beside me, checking my pulse with the speed of someone who's done it 10,000 times. His jaw tightened. "You missed your dose," he said flatly. "Not good. Not good at all." Then he turned his head sharply toward my son and daughter-in-law. "Where," he demanded, "are his medications?" Marcus stuttered. We don't know. He must have—" "Don't lie to me," the doctor said, voice ice cold. "Not in front of me. Not today." Claire swallowed. "We didn't mean any harm." "Harm?" he snapped, standing so quickly she stepped back. "Do you understand what denying him his medication can cause? Stroke? Cardiac event? Collapse? You withheld a vital prescription. That is not a misunderstanding. That is not forgetfulness." He stepped closer to them, lowering his voice into a tone that dredged up childhood obedience from the depths of their adult bodies. "That is elder neglect." Marcus paled. Claire's mouth trembled. I mean, we just thought," she whispered. "No," he cut her off. "You did not think. You tried to exert control through denial, and you endangered his life." My children stood frozen, caught, exposed, stripped of the excuses they tried to hide behind. And for the first time since my wife died, I felt something unfamiliar rising inside me. Not weakness, not fear. Power. A power born not from strength, but from truth. A truth they could no longer outrun. The doctor stepped back toward me and touched my shoulder. "Harold," he said gently, "we're going to fix this." And for the first time all day, the dizziness didn't feel like the floor slipping away. It felt like something else finally settling into place. The house felt smaller after the doctor's words. Not physically. Its walls were the same, its hallways unchanged. But something in the air had tightened, like the whole place was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. My son and daughter-in-law stood in the living room as if they were children again, cornered after doing something they knew was wrong. I watched them from the couch, my pulse still unsteady, but my mind clearer than it had been all morning. "Where are the pills?" Dr. Alvarez repeated, slower now, but with a sharper edge. Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it again. His hands twitched at his sides in a way I remembered well. It was the same nervous tic he had when he broke a neighbor's window at age 10 and lied about it until the neighbor brought the ball to our door. Except now the lie wasn't about a window, it was about my life. "We didn't hide anything," he said weakly. "That's the third time you've said those words," the doctor replied, and every time they sound more like fear than truth. Claire pressed a hand to her chest as if she were the victim here. "We didn't want to hurt him," she said, her voice annoyingly soft. "We just needed some space. He's been difficult." Difficult. They used the word the way people swatted flies, careless, dismissive, with no regard for what they're striking. Dr. Alvarez pivoted sharply toward her. "Difficult? That's your justification for withholding medically necessary treatment? In what world is that acceptable?" Claire's face flushed red. "You weren't here last night. You didn't hear how he talked to us." The doctor crossed his arms, his expression a fortress of disdain. What could he possibly have said that deserved endangering his health? "He questioned our parenting," Marcus blurted. Ah, there it was. The fragile ego, the wounded pride, the deepest insecurity masked as righteous anger. "He accused us of being irresponsible," Claire added quickly. "We were gone for only a few minutes." "You left a 6-year-old unattended," the doctor replied. "That is irresponsible." Their faces faltered. "And even if it weren't," he continued, "your father expressing concern does not justify retaliation." His voice hardened. "Where are the pills?" Marcus looked at Claire. Claire looked at Marcus. A silent battle passed between them, fear mixed with stubbornness, shame mixed with self-preservation. Claire cracked first. "They're in the kitchen," she said quietly. "Where in the kitchen?" the doctor demanded. She swallowed. "Above the cabinets." He blinked. "Above the—" He didn't even finish. His disbelief said enough. Marcus rushed in. "It was just to get him to calm down. He was so worked up last night. We thought maybe missing a dose would—" "Missing a dose could kill him," Dr. Alvarez roared. The room fell silent again, but this silence was different. Thicker, heavier, with guilt hanging like humidity. Claire slipped away toward the kitchen, climbing onto a stool to reach the high cabinet above the fridge. I heard shuffling, then the scrape of plastic. She returned with the weekly pill organizer, clutched in her hand like a guilty child returning stolen candy. My name was still written on the label. The doctor snatched it from her, opened the lid, inspected the contents, then shook his head. "Unbelievable," he muttered. He walked back to me, kneeling down. "Harold, take these," he said softly, placing the appropriate pills in my palm. His voice gentled, like a father to a son. Slowly, one at a time. I took each pill with trembling fingers, swallowing them with the water he brought me. The dizziness didn't disappear instantly, but relief washed over me in small waves, my body recognizing what it had been starved for. When I finished, he stood up and turned toward my children again. And now his voice turned lethal. "I'm required to report this," he said. "You understand that, don't you?" Marcus's face drained. "Report? No, wait, that's not necessary." "It is," the doctor snapped. "Elder neglect is a serious offense. The state does not take it lightly." Claire stepped forward, trembling. "We didn't mean—" "Intent does not determine harm," he cut her off. "Your actions put his health at risk, maybe his life." I watched them unravel in front of me, and I felt no satisfaction, no triumph, only a quiet, weary ache. This was my son, my own blood, standing there begging a doctor not to file a report because he didn't want consequences, not because he regretted what they had done to me. "I can't have this on my record," Marcus said, voice cracking. "My job, my reputation. Dad, please say something." I lifted my gaze to him. For once, he looked small, not in the physical sense, but in the way that only a person stripped of excuses can appear. "Marcus," I said softly, "you hid my medication." "It was a mistake," he insisted. "We were angry. I'm sorry. Dad, please don't let him report this." Claire stepped in closer, tears forming. "We really didn't want to hurt you." Dr. Alvarez scoffed. "Your justification is irrelevant." "I'll fix it," Marcus said desperately, turning to me. "We'll do better. We'll make it right. Just don't let this become a legal thing." He reached toward me as if to take my hand, but I pulled my hand back. Slowly, firmly. The hurt in his eyes was instant, but so was the realization. For the first time in years, I held something he wanted. My silence. My forgiveness. My decision. And I wasn't rushing to give it. Dr. Alvarez stood beside me, a solid presence, a wall of support I hadn't felt since my younger days. "I'll step outside and make some calls," he said. "Harold, keep seated. Don't move too quickly." He walked out the front door, leaving Marcus and Claire standing like two children who'd been told to wait in the principal's office. The silence between us thickened until it became unbearable. Claire broke it first. "You're not actually going to let him report this, right?" I looked at her, at both of them, at the people who should have been my protectors, but instead became the ones I needed protection from. And for the first time, I didn't feel old, or weak, or helpless. I felt awake. "No," I whispered. "I'm not going to stop him." Their faces collapsed into panic, but my heart, for the first time that day, felt steady, because something inside me had shifted, quietly, decisively. And once an old man's heart decides something, it rarely changes back. Dr. Alvarez stepped outside, leaving the front door slightly ajar behind him. Through that narrow crack, I could hear the murmur of his voice, sharp, precise, unmistakably urgent, though I couldn't make out the words. He wasn't the type of man who needed volume to command authority. Urgency lived in the tone, not in the decibels. In the living room, the silence pressed in around us like wet wool. Heavy, suffocating. My son and daughter-in-law hovered near the hallway as if they were deciding whether to run or to fight. Neither option suited them anymore. Marcus finally broke. "Dad, you don't understand what this could do to us," he said, his voice thin with panic. "If a report goes through, it could affect everything." I watched him with a stillness that surprised even me. There was no raised voice inside me, no tremor of anger, just a deep, hollow ache. The kind you feel when you realize someone you love has been living behind a mask you never bothered to look behind. Claire took a hesitant step forward, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "Please, we're sorry. We really are." "Are you?" I asked quietly. "Or are you just afraid of what comes next?" She swallowed. Her silence was answer enough. Marcus dragged a hand through his hair. "Dad, look, we overreacted, okay? It was stupid, but we weren't trying to hurt you." "You hid medication that keeps my heart working," I said, my voice softer than their guilt deserved. "That's not a small mistake." "It was one time," he snapped. I tilted my head. "And what happens the next time you're angry, or stressed, or feel like I'm difficult again?" His jaw clenched. He had no answer for that. A faint breeze slipped through the open door, carrying in the scent of cut grass from the neighbor's yard. For a moment, I closed my eyes and let it wash over me. Little reminders that the world outside this house was still turning, still moving, still holding room for me somewhere. "You weren't supposed to call anyone," Claire murmured, almost to herself. "You were supposed to calm down." I opened my eyes. Calm down from what? Concern? Fear for my grandson? Or the humiliation of being told I don't belong in my own family? Marcus flinched. Dad, don't say it like that. How else should I say it? I asked. Because that's how you made me feel. He looked like a boy again then, not the man with the job and the mortgage and the carefully trimmed beard, but the boy who once hid behind my pant leg when thunderstorms cracked the sky. The boy who believed I could fix anything. Except now, the only storm was inside this house. We stood in that echo for a long few seconds. Then footsteps approached from the porch. Dr. Alvarez stepped back inside, closing the door with a controlled click. His expression carried a weight my children immediately recognized. The look of a man who had taken action. Marcus's throat bobbed. "What did you do?" The doctor didn't answer him. Instead, he addressed me. "Harold, I've contacted a social worker I trust. She's already on her way. About 20 minutes. Claire's breath caught. A social worker? For what? For you, he said sharply, to learn what happens when you endanger an elder under your care. Marcus's voice cracked. Doctor, please. No, the doctor said. No more excuses. No more minimizing. Your father could have collapsed this morning. And had that happened, the question the paramedics would ask is why he didn't take his medication. And you would have no answer. Claire covered her mouth with her hand, eyes wide. A tremor, not of fear, but of anger, ran beneath Marcus's voice. Dad, please don't let this happen. This will ruin us. Ruin them. Ruin them. The phrasing struck me like a slap. Not, it could have ruined Dad's life. Not, we could have hurt him. Only themselves. It was then the final piece clicked into place inside my chest. They didn't fear losing me. They feared losing the comfortable life they had built on my quiet compliance. My daughter-in-law sank onto the love seat across from me. Her eyes were red, but not from empathy, from dread. Dr. Alvarez, she whispered, we made a mistake, but families fight. You're making this seem worse than it was. He turned to her with a cold precision. Do not insult me. I have seen real neglect, and I have seen real care. What happened here was not a fight. It was control. And when control endangers health, it becomes a reportable offense. Marcus paced, hands on his head. Dad, just tell him you don't want to report. They'll listen to you. The doctor shook his head. The report is mandatory now. My duty is to protect the patient. A long breath left my lungs, shaky but resolute. Dad, Marcus said, say something. I lifted my gaze slowly, meeting his eyes. And in that moment, I didn't see my grown son. I saw the accumulation of years, slights I ignored, choices I excused, moments I let slide because family comes first. Not today. Marcus, I said calmly, I am done being treated like an inconvenience. His breathing hitched. You hid the one thing keeping me in this world, I continued. And now you want me to protect you from consequences? He stared at me, stunned into silence. Claire leaned forward. But we're your family. A sad, tired smile tugged at the corner of my mouth. Family doesn't make you feel like a burden. Family doesn't gamble with your health to win an argument. The room held its breath. Then I added quietly, you stopped being my safe place a long time ago. Claire wiped at her eyes. So what? You want to punish us? No, I whispered. I want you to understand what you've done. The doctor nodded once, approving, not of punishing them, but of clarity finally being spoken. Footsteps echoed faintly outside, the unmistakable approach of someone else, the social worker. Marcus turned toward the door in panic, but he didn't run. Adults don't run from consequences. Only children do. I sat back against the couch, feeling a strange sensation wash over me. Not victory, not satisfaction. Relief. A relief so deep it made my bones lighter. For the first time in years, I felt the shift in the air. The old power of a father wasn't coming back, but something better was. My agency, my voice, my life, no longer dictated by people who believed age meant powerlessness. Someone knocked gently at the door. Dr. Alvarez nodded. "That will be Miss Turner. Let me bring her in." And as he stepped toward the hallway, my children stood frozen, side by side, like two people waiting for a verdict they never imagined would come from the father they underestimated. The door opened. Light spilled into the room, and I exhaled, steady, certain. Something was about to change, for them and for me. When the door opened and Miss Turner stepped inside, the atmosphere in the house tightened like a rope pulled too fast. She was not what my children expected. I saw it instantly. They were bracing for someone frail, kindly, someone they could charm or talk circles around. Instead, a woman in her early 50s entered with the kind of calm confidence that comes from decades of walking into tense homes and seeing through every excuse ever invented. Her expression was neutral, but her eyes took everything in. The scattered dishes on the counter, the tension in Marcus's fists, the way Claire hovered near the armchair like a frightened sparrow. And then she looked at me. "Mr. Bennett?" she asked gently. I nodded. "Yes." She knelt beside the couch, an unusual gesture for someone in her position, but I understood immediately why. She was placing herself at my level, not towering over me the way everyone else here did. "My name is Karen Turner," she said. "I'm here to check on your safety. Is it all right if I ask you a few questions?" I nodded again, slower this time. "Of course." Behind her, Marcus cleared his throat loudly. "Look, this is all being blown out of proportion. We didn't—" She held up a hand without turning around. "I'll speak with you shortly." Marcus stopped talking mid-sentence. Claire's breath hitched at the same time, an almost synchronized display of fear. Miss Turner returned her attention to me. "Are you feeling all right?" "Dizzy," I admitted. "Weaker than usual." "That often happens without medication," she said softly. "Were you denied access to your pills today?" I inhaled, a slow breath that scraped my chest on the way in. "Yes." "Intentionally?" she asked. My eyes drifted toward my son and daughter-in-law. Their faces were pale masks of guilt. "Yes," I said, "intentionally." Claire gasped as if the truth had pierced her. "Dad, how can you say—" "Quiet," Miss Turner said sharply. "You'll have your turn." Marcus's fists clenched so tightly the knuckles blanched white. "This is insane. Dad, why are you doing this?" The words were almost laughable, as if I had orchestrated any of this, as if all of this began because I wanted punishment instead of safety. Miss Turner lowered her voice, almost to a whisper. "Mr. Bennett, can you tell me what happened?" So I did. Not dramatically, not with embellishment, just the truth. I told her how I woke up and couldn't find my medication, how they brushed me off, how the dizziness worsened, how the argument last night centered around my grandson, how their anger escalated into retaliation. With every word, my children shrank a little more, wilted like plants denied sunlight. Miss Turner listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally, making small notes on a tablet she carried. When I finished, she exhaled slowly. The kind of exhale that comes when someone hears a story they've heard too many variations of in their line of work. "Thank you," she said. "You did the right thing calling your doctor." She stood and finally turned to face my son and daughter-in-law. Her expression hardened into something far less gentle. "I need the two of you to explain," she said. "Why did you restrict access to his medication?" Marcus stepped forward quickly, hands raised. Okay, look, yes, we moved the pills, but we weren't trying to hurt him. He was out of control last night, and we were trying to calm things down." People do things in the heat of the moment. "People do not hide essential medication," she said flatly. Claire spoke next, her voice trembling. We thought he was exaggerating how bad he needed them." The silence that followed was suffocating. Miss Turner stared at her for a long moment before speaking. You decided, without medical training, without consulting a professional, to withhold prescribed medication from an elderly man with a heart condition? Claire's voice shrank to almost nothing. It sounds worse when you say it like that. It doesn't sound worse, Miss Turner said. It sounds accurate. She turned to Marcus. And you allowed this? He opened his mouth, closed it, then finally muttered, I didn't think it would be a big deal. Not a big deal. Not a big deal that my heart could stop. Not a big deal that my dizziness could have led to a fall. Not a big deal that I was suffering in plain sight. Dr. Alvarez, who had been standing silently in the corner like a storm waiting for the right moment, finally spoke. You should be grateful he didn't collapse, he said calmly. I have seen people die from missing one dose, and if he had, you would be explaining this to paramedics, then police, then a judge. Marcus and Claire both froze. That's enough, Marcus whispered. We get it. No, Miss Turner corrected. You don't get it. Not yet. She stepped closer, her posture commanding enough to make both of them take an unconscious step back. I'm filing an immediate report, she said. And until this is resolved, certain measures will be in place regarding Mr. Bennett's care. Claire's hand flew to her mouth. What measures? We will determine whether it is safe for him to continue living here, she replied. Marcus looked like she had slapped him. What? He shouted. You can't just take him away. This is his home. I looked up slowly. My home? I repeated softly. Is that what you call this? Because it hasn't felt like my home for a long time. The words struck something in them. Maybe guilt, maybe fear, maybe recognition. Their faces shifted, their bravado cracking like thin ice. Miss Turner nodded as if confirming my statement internally. It's clear this environment is not safe for him, she said. I'll need to speak with Mr. Bennett privately now. Marcus tried to protest. We're his family. We should be... You forfeited that role the moment you put him at risk, she said. I watched my children crumble beneath the weight of their own consequences. They didn't cry out of sorrow. They cried out of fear. Fear of losing control. Fear of losing reputation. Fear of losing the father they took for granted until the moment he needed protection, they refused to give. Miss Turner motioned to me. Let's go somewhere we can talk privately, Mr. Bennett. I stood slowly, steadier now, and followed her down the hallway. Each step felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I had forgotten, a piece they thought age had taken. But age doesn't take strength. It condenses it. It sharpens it. And as I closed the door behind us, ready to speak my truth without interruption, I realized this was the moment everything changed. Not just for them, for me, for whatever came next. Miss Turner led me into my small bedroom, the one I had tried to make feel like home, even though the walls never absorbed warmth the way they used to in the old house I shared with my wife. She closed the door gently behind us, then pulled the desk chair closer so she could sit facing me. No judgment in her eyes, no pity either, just clarity. Mr. Bennett, she began, folding her hands in her lap, I want to hear your perspective without interruption. Please speak freely. The room felt too quiet at first. My own breathing filled the space. I sat on the edge of my bed, fingers loosely intertwined, looking at the small framed photo of my grandson on the nightstand. His missing teeth, his crooked smile, his little hand holding mine. And I wondered, not for the first time, how a child so pure could be raised in a home so poisoned. I exhaled. I've been living here for almost 3 years. She nodded. Since your wife passed? Yes. The word was small, but carrying it felt heavy. My son didn't want me alone, or at least, that's what he said at first. And what changed? She asked gently. I stared at my hands. The veins looked more prominent these days, like rivers drawn on parchment. At first, they were kind, accommodating. They let me cook dinner sometimes, let me help with Noah. They acted like they wanted me here. Acted, she repeated softly. I nodded. As time passed, I became more of an inconvenient, a thing to be worked around, something they tolerated rather than wanted. Her expression remained neutral, but her eyes sharpened. Can you give me an example? I gave her dozens. The time they forgot to pick up my prescription, the many times they held family gatherings and left me out of the photos, the nights they told friends I was difficult so they'd have an excuse to leave me at home with the grandchild, the way they'd laugh when I repeated myself as if my aging memory were a comedy routine instead of a warning sign. I didn't spare myself from blame. I admitted I can be stubborn, opinionated, slow to accept new routines. But the best moments of the conversation came when I looked up and found Miss Turner listening without impatience. Eventually, I reached the moment that mattered most. Last night, I said, I got upset when they left my grandson alone in the house. Her eyebrows lifted. How long was he alone? 5 minutes, I replied, but long enough for something unimaginable to happen. He's 6. She nodded. 6 is very young. You were right to worry. The validation nearly broke me. I continued, voice tightening. They said I was interfering, that I didn't know my place. And this morning, my medication was gone. You're sure they hid it because of the argument? She asked. I heard them talking, I whispered. Claire said, maybe without the pills, he'll stop getting into things. My son didn't disagree. Miss Turner inhaled slowly, almost as if absorbing the weight of those words. That is extremely concerning behavior. We sat with that silence for a moment. Then she asked, Mr. Bennett, do you feel safe in this home? The answer came out of me before my mind had time to filter it. No. Not whispered, not hesitant, not softened. Just the truth. Plain, unvarnished truth. Her posture stiffened, not with alarm, but with certainty. Thank you for being honest. A knock came at the door then, soft, tentative. Dad? Marcus's voice. Can we talk? Turner stood and opened the door just enough to stand between us. Not right now. I'm still speaking with your father. He stiffened in the hallway, jaw ticking with the impatience of a man who has spent too long believing the world will bend to him. I need to know what's going on. You'll know when I'm finished, she replied. He shifted, frustrated. He's my father. And you endangered him, she said calmly. You need to let the process play out. He stared at her, stunned into silence. Then, for the second time that day, he retreated down the hall like a reprimanded child. Miss Turner closed the door gently and sat again. Mr. Bennett, she said softly, you have options, and I need to know what you want, not what your children want, not what they expect of you. What do you, Harold Bennett, want for yourself? For once, I didn't feel pressured to answer quickly. I let the questions settle into me, drifting into the quiet spaces age has carved inside my soul. What did I want? To feel safe, to feel respected, to feel like my life still meant something more than obligation or inconvenience. And most of all, I wanted peace. I rubbed my thumb across my palm. I want to live somewhere quiet, I said softly, where no one resents me for breathing. She nodded slowly, her voice warm. You deserve that. A lump formed in my throat. Does it make me a bad father, I whispered, to admit I don't want to live here anymore? She reached out, resting her hand briefly on mine. No, it makes you a man who values his own dignity. Her words cracked something inside me, like a fault line finally giving way. But what about my grandson? I murmured, tears gathering at the corners of my eyes. He's the only reason I stayed. He's the only one who sees me. She gave me a sad smile. You can still see him. You can still be part of his life. But you don't have to sacrifice your safety to do so. More tears, soft and quiet, escaped down my cheeks. I hadn't cried since the day I buried my wife. Miss Turner gave me a moment. When I finally wiped my face, she asked gently, Do you want me to arrange alternative living arrangements? My voice was steadier than I felt. Yes. Good, she said. I'll help you through the entire process. We rose together and opened the door. And the moment we stepped back into the hallway, I saw Marcus and Claire waiting there. Fear etched across their faces, desperation clinging to them like shadows. They knew. They could see it in my posture, in the set of my jaw, in the quiet certainty I carried with me now. They realized something pivotal. I wasn't staying. Not in this house, not under their control, not with people who believed fear was a teaching tool. Their faces fell, jaws slack, eyes widening in disbelief. And I felt, for the first time in years, strong. Even as my body trembled from the lack of medicine earlier, my soul stood tall. Dr. Alvarez straightened behind them. Miss Turner cleared her throat, and I spoke before either of my children could open their mouths. I'm leaving, I said. Not later, not eventually. Today. The walls seemed to inhale. Then the storm began. The words, "I'm leaving today," seemed to echo through the hallway long after I'd spoken them. The house reacted first, its worn floorboards creaking sharply under the sudden stillness, as if even the wood understood the gravity of the moment. Then, my children. Marcus's eyes widened like he had just watched the ground crack beneath him. Claire's lips parted in shock, a hand flying instinctively to her chest, the gesture of someone who had never expected consequences to arrive so quickly or so decisively. You're, what? Marcus finally choked out. I met his gaze evenly, no tremor in my voice. I'm leaving this house. You can't just, Dad, you can't just walk out. Where would you even go? Miss Turner stepped forward before I could answer. I'll be arranging placement for Mr. Bennett in a community where he can receive proper care and support. Claire let out a disbelieving laugh, thin and shaky. A community? An old folks' home? Is that what you want, Harold? To live with strangers? Her voice carried a note of desperation, but not for me, for control. I breathed in through my nose, slow and steady. I want to live in a place where people don't hide my medication when they're angry. Marcus's mouth tightened, and his eyes flickered with something ugly, shame swallowing pride. That was one mistake, he muttered. One? You're going to throw away everything over one mistake? I stared at him. One mistake. As if nearly putting me in the hospital was equivalent to forgetting to take out the trash. You put my life at risk, I said softly. What exactly do you think that's worth? He opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again, but no words came out. His throat worked soundlessly, like he was swallowing stones. Claire stepped in next. Her mascara had begun to smudge at the corners of her eyes. Dad, please, we can fix this. We'll do better. We'll set reminders for your pills. Reminders aren't the problem, I said. She blinked rapidly. Then what is? I exhaled, letting years of swallowed words rise to the surface. The problem is I don't feel safe here, not physically, not emotionally. A silence settled over us, heavy and unmoving. Dr. Alvarez stepped forward, arms crossed, his tone like a sword being drawn. Your father nearly suffered a cardiac event today. If we hadn't intervened, the outcome could have been catastrophic. Marcus turned to him sharply. You're blowing this out of proportion. No, the doctor said, eyes narrowing. You're minimizing your actions. There's a difference. Miss Turner touched my shoulder gently. Mr. Bennett, we can gather your belongings whenever you're ready. Marcus panicked. Hold on, hold on. You can't take him without my consent. Miss Turner's tone was calm, firm, unshakable. He is a competent adult. He makes his own decisions. But this is his home. I looked up at him. It used to be. A flicker, just a flicker, crossed his face. Something like regret, or maybe just guilt wearing a mask of regret. Hard to tell the difference with him lately. Claire's voice broke next. What about Noah? At the sound of my grandson's name, something inside me tightened painfully. My sweet boy, with his big eyes and crooked smile. The child who slipped me drawings under my door, who asked me to read him bedtime stories when his parents forgot. Yes, I whispered. What about him? You're just leaving him? She asked, voice trembling. I met her eyes. I'm leaving you. I'll never leave him. Claire looked shaken. Marcus looked betrayed, but neither looked innocent. Dad, Marcus said, his voice cracking, if you walk out that door, things will never be the same. Dr. Alvarez cleared his throat. They shouldn't be. Marcus shot him an icy look. This is a family matter. And families don't endanger their elders, the doctor replied. I raised my hand slightly, stopping the argument before it spiraled further. Enough. They turned to me. I've spent years shrinking myself so you could feel bigger, I said quietly. I convinced myself that patience was love, that silence was peace, that tolerance was good parenting. But today you showed me what you truly think of me. I let my eyes settle on both of them, slowly, deeply. They didn't look away. You think I am fragile, helpless, a burden. No, Claire whispered. Yes, I said, and you've treated me that way for a long time. The truth weighed heavier than any accusation. Marcus took a step toward me. Dad, please, don't do this. Let us make it right. Let us try. You've had years to try, I replied, and every time you chose convenience over care. Miss Turner stepped forward. Mr. Bennett, would you like help packing? I nodded. The air shifted instantly. Something about that small, simple nod broke whatever illusion remained. I wasn't bluffing. I wasn't threatening. I was leaving. For real. Now. Claire leaned against the wall as if her knees had buckled, tears sliding down her cheeks. Marcus ran a hand across his face in disbelief. You can't just walk away, he whispered. I met his eyes. You made that choice for me. As Miss Turner and Dr. Alvarez began gathering my things, I stood slowly, steadying myself on the couch. The dizziness had lessened with the medication, but my legs still shook. Not from weakness, but from the weight of finally standing up after bending for so long. Claire whispered to her husband, voice cracking, "We lost him." Marcus didn't answer. He couldn't. He just watched me, stunned, hollow, realizing that the father who once carried him on his shoulders now carried something else entirely, his own freedom. As I walked toward my room to collect the last of my belongings, the hallway lights flickered on. Sunlight spilled through the windows in long golden beams. A new beginning. A painful one. A necessary one. Behind me, I heard Marcus's voice, small, broken, unsteady. Dad, please. I paused at my door, but I didn't turn around. I gave you every chance, I said softly, and you taught me the hardest truth an old man can learn. Sometimes, the people you raised grow into people you can't live with. And then I stepped inside my room. To pack, to leave, to reclaim the part of myself I lost long before today. Packing should have been slow work for an old man, but there's a strange thing about reclaiming your freedom after years of shrinking into yourself. Your hands find a steadiness they haven't felt in decades. Every folded shirt felt like shedding a layer of humiliation. Every book I placed in the box felt like lifting a stone off my chest. Miss Turner and Dr. Alvarez moved quietly around me, collecting my things with a gentle efficiency that contrasted painfully with the chaos in the rest of the house. My children whispered anxiously in the hallway, their voices low but strained, rising and falling like waves crashing against a shoreline they no longer recognized. "Dad," Marcus called out again, voice cracking under its own weight. "Please, just talk to us." I didn't respond, not because I wanted to hurt him, but because there comes a moment in a man's life when the words he doesn't say matter more than the ones he does, when everything important has already been spoken. A moment later, Claire appeared at my doorframe, her mascara smudged, her shoulders shaking. "Harold, please." She pressed a hand against the wall for support. "We didn't mean for any of this to happen." I paused, a sweater in my hands, soft and worn. My wife had knitted it for me decades ago. The thread survived longer than the love inside this house. You didn't mean for it to happen, I repeated softly. But it happened. Claire's face crumpled. People say things when they're upset. We didn't think. That, I interrupted gently, is the problem. You didn't think. She blinked rapidly, tears spilling. Are you really leaving? I folded the sweater and placed it in the suitcase. Yes. She covered her mouth to stifle a sob. Behind her, Marcus stepped forward. He looked smaller than I'd ever seen him, like the weight of adulthood had finally settled in a place he couldn't ignore. "Dad," he said, voice trembling, "if you go, I don't know how to fix this." The confession lingered between us, honest, raw, too late. "You don't fix something by pretending it wasn't broken," I said. "You fix it by acknowledging who broke it." His breathing hitched. For a moment, the man in front of me wasn't the one who hid my medication or dismissed my concerns or made me feel like a burden. For a moment, he was just my son, lost, scared, realizing the consequences of his actions in a way only silence could force upon him. "Dad," he whispered, "I'm sorry." I believed him. For the first time in a long while, I believed him. But apologies don't erase harm. They only begin the slow work of repairing what was damaged. And I wasn't going to gamble my safety on a maybe. Not again. Miss Turner closed my suitcase with a quiet click. "All right, Mr. Bennett, whenever you're ready." I nodded, turning toward the door. My legs were steadier now, my heart too. As I walked down the hallway, I felt every memory tug at me. Marcus laughing as a boy when I pretended not to find him during hide-and-seek. Claire hugging me after her engagement party, calling me her second dad. Noah running into my arms every time I walked through the front door. But memories can be deceiving. They show only what once was, not what is. At the end of the hallway, Noah appeared, my grandson. His eyes red, his little fists gripping a folded paper. "Grandpa, are you leaving?" he whispered. My heart cracked open. I knelt, slowly, carefully, until we were eye level. "Yes, sweetheart, but you'll still see me, I promise." He swallowed hard. "They said you were mad, but I know you're just sad. Children see truth adults run from." "I made you this," he said, holding out the paper. I unfolded it. A drawing. 2 stick figures, one taller, one shorter, both smiling, standing under a tree. The words, "I love you, Grandpa," scribbled in big, uneven letters. My vision blurred. I hugged him tightly. "I love you too, Noah, always." He nodded against my shoulder, and I felt his small tears soak into my shirt. When I stood again, Marcus was watching. He looked like a man finally understanding the depth of what he'd lost. "Dad," he said quietly, "I hope one day you'll forgive us." I met his gaze. "Forgiveness isn't the problem, son. Trust is. And trust, once shattered, doesn't grow back in the same way." We made our way to the front door, my suitcase in Dr. Alvarez's hand, Miss Turner walking ahead. The sunlight outside warm against the doorway. But before I stepped out, I turned back one last time. My children stood in the living room, broken, remorseful, desperate, and yet, still too late. "You know," I said softly, "your mother always believed you'd stand by me in my old age. I wish she'd been right." Claire started crying again. Marcus looked away. It was time. I stepped out the door, into the sunlight, into air that didn't feel heavy, into freedom that didn't feel borrowed. The senior community was waiting, a place with gentle routines, respectful staff, and quiet mornings I could call my own again. But the real twist? It came later that night. After I'd settled into my new room, Miss Turner handed me a folder. "These are your legal documents," she said, "in case you ever want to adjust your estate." I opened the folder, running my fingers over the papers. I didn't need to read them long. I knew exactly what I wanted. My children would not be harmed, not legally, not financially. I wasn't vengeful by nature. Age tempers wrath into clarity. But I made one change, a quiet, devastating one. I adjusted my will. Everything, every cent of my savings, every possession of sentimental value, every asset, would one day belong to the only person in that house who treated me with kindness, my grandson. Not out of spite, out of recognition, out of love, out of the truth that children inherit not what you leave them, but how you lived with them. And as I signed the papers, a warm calm settled into my chest. In the dim glow of the bedside lamp, I whispered to myself, I may be old, but I am not powerless. The world outside hummed softly. New walls surrounded me. New beginnings waited at my door. And for the first time in years, I felt safe. I felt seen. I felt free. The old man they underestimated had finally stood up. And he wasn't going back.